Hi everybody, Father Alex here. Welcome to another episode of the Godcast. I'm the vicar of St Matthew's Church in Burnley. I'm a member of the Church of England General Synod. I'm the host of Our Daily Bread from Argos to the Altar Priest Story. Do check that out. And if you like the videos, there are literally hundreds now of videos on here with politicians, musicians, celebrities, sports people, something for everybody. But my guest today on the Godcast is Venice Allan, and Venice is a female rights activist, and we're going to have a really good conversation. Do hope you enjoy it. So enjoy this interview now with Venice Allan. Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast this week is Venice Allan. Venice is a female activist fighting for women's rights. Venice, it's great to get you on the Godcast. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks, Alex. Thanks so much for inviting me on.
Venice, I hope you don't mind me asking. I want to start by asking you about your Christian name because it's a wonderful name. It's quite unusual. Do you know the origins or why you got that name? I'm sure you must have asked.
Well, my parents honeymoon there.
Simple as.
Well, yeah, sort of. There's a bit of a longer story, but it probably is a bit too long. But
All
yeah,
right,
that's basically it. They honeymoon there. I wasn't conceived there, but they had a great time.
great. All right, I guessed it might be a
It's a
connection.
Victorian name like Florence, but because Florence Nightingale made it famous, then that name remained. Also, Siena, other cities on the Grand Tour.
Yeah, great. And Venice, I started by saying you're a female activist. Let's just go back a little bit, if we can,
Oh.
to maybe teenage life of Venice. Were you politically engaged as a teenager? Were things kind of grinding your gears? Just tell us a bit.
Well, my parents were both quite political. Um, so I was like on CND marches on my buggy as a small child, and yeah, I suppose as a teenager, I was interested in women's rights. But as I became a young woman, I kind of felt like we'd arrived. I didn't realize that I'd be spending so much time in my adulthood, sort of working on the basics of like what is a woman.
And what was the kind of the first thing that you kind of remember thinking, oh, this doesn't sit right. This doesn't feel right. Can you recall that?
About the trans issue.
No, just generally as a young
Oh,
person about women's rights and things like that.
well, I think just growing up, like we did feel like growing up I was born in the mid 70s. So growing up in the 80s and 90s, we felt like, we had a female prime minister and queen, and we just felt like we were so much further than all the women before us. However, we were still, as a teenager, I still felt like sexualized and ignored. And even as I got older, sort of just before I kind of noticed the trans thing, I did notice that actually socially women are not treated the same as men.
And what was it like? You say you were raised in a family with CND marches. You couldn't find a more polar opposite than Margaret Thatcher, could you? Was
Well, no, yeah.
how did that sit in the family?
Well,
As a
we
young,
weren't.
but
Yeah, we weren't. My parents were Labour voters, and we weren't Thatcher supporters growing up. However, the fact that she was a woman and she was just a woman, and that was kind of incidental to me as a child. I just thought, oh yeah, women are prime ministers. Yeah, so what? I think it was good to take that for granted, even if you didn't agree with their politics.
yeah, it's interesting. It reminds me of years ago. I worked for Argos, and I was a manager, and we were looking at leaders. And we were asked to pick leaders who we might not necessarily agree with, but we respected because of who they were and what they'd
Mm.
achieved. And Thatcher came up. This is only 10 years ago. Do you see any positives in the legacy that she left behind?
Well, I don't know. I'm not like super knowledgeable about politics, but I think what her agenda was felt very radical at the time, sort of destroying the welfare state bit by bit, and her, into our industries like mining, which was very strong in my mind. But I think actually now the world's gone so crazy that it doesn't seem that radical anymore.
So as you got older and you progressed, just tell us how your activism and your kind of life played out and how you kind of
Yeah.
you started getting irritated more or wanted to engage more.
Uh, I guess as I said, I wasn't really that political. Uh, and then I had like babies. I lived abroad and I had my babies abroad, so I just really didn't follow what was going on in the UK that much. There was like the Iraq War. We went on a few marches in Italy where we were living, and I saw my family on the marches here. And and like before that, like poll tax march. Like I went on that, and but yeah, no, I wasn't really that political. Um, I guess the kind of when I got into Labour Party politics was when Jeremy Corbyn became the leader of the Labour Party. Like my brother's very political, and he suggested that we all put £10 on Jeremy being the leader of the Labour Party, and so we all won £1,000. So I kind of felt like he was like my lucky guy, and I thought, oh yeah, he's very left. That's why they don't like him, and they kind of smear him. So when the trans thing came up, I just thought, oh, well, I joined Momentum. I just thought, well, I just need to explain because he was leader by that point. I was like, we just need to explain to Jeremy. Surely he'll understand. And that's the sort of beginning of my political journey, really.
And how does that leave you now with politics? Do you feel politically homeless,
Mm.
Venice? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, definitely. Well, I volunteer in the House of Lords for Claire Fox, Baroness Fox, and she's a non-affiliated peer, and I really love the freedom of that, being able to work with all the parties, people from all parties and none.
yeah, I find I, I, I'm not sure. I don't know how many similarities there are between us, but as a priest, I feel quite privileged, really, because I'm not politically aligned anywhere, and it does mean that I can, from what I would say, speak from the heart. Speak with real integrity, not following any particular agenda other than what I might see as the Christian agenda. And when you look at the issue around trans, it seems there's lots of noise outside of politics, um, but politicians per se seem to be reluctant to kind of really drill down into the detail. Would you concur with that, or?
Yeah, I think it is really difficult for politicians, and it's really extraordinary to see how so many of them completely changed. When I started campaigning, the Conservative Party were, under Theresa May, were sort of totally happy with all these proposals, which now seem horrifying. So, like reducing, it was basically similar to what they tried to do in Scotland with the GRR. Reducing the age of legal gender change to 16, and yeah, and just self ID and just terrible things, basically.
So regarding the trans issue,
Mm.
Venice, what was the starting point for you becoming irritable about this? Was this just from an early belief and understanding that you felt that being trans was just inappropriate, was wrong? Just tell us a bit about that.
No, not really, because I am a very liberal sort of person, and as I say, I wasn't that politically engaged. I used to drink at what now is uh, described as a queer pub, and there were men in women's clothes there, and I probably was. I mean, I think at least once I definitely said, "Oh, come into the ladies." I was totally. I didn't think about it. I didn't think it was a problem. I didn't find it offensive. I just I just hadn't really thought about it. And again, it was like my brother, who's very involved in politics on the far left. He had told me at first about this kind of like clash between women's rights and trans rights, and my immediate reaction, I'm afraid, was, oh, it's such a small number of people. It never happens. And then he was like, no. He told me about, I think it's a prisoner, a male prisoner called Tara Hudson, who's a while ago, and he was like, no, look, this man is like or trans women, I don't know what he would have said then, but like is showing off about their 7-inch surprise in a women's prison. And I was like, what? And then I looked at Canada and what was happening there. I think the first thing that really, what we call, piqued me, against this whole ideology, was seeing trans women, men, going into the Vancouver Feminist Library and vandalizing it. And I thought, oh wow, that was really like a way of seeing that clash, and going, okay, I need to think about this further. And then really listening to Canadian and American journalist Megan Murphy, and as well as the young Scottish YouTuber Magdalene Burns. And so listening to their reading what they'd said, it really all started. It doesn't take much digging, does it, Alex, to sort of go, oh wow, this is actually really harmful.
And so move on from there, Venice. How did this progress? Just tell us how it evolved for you.
Oh well, as I say, I was a member of Momentum and a fan of Jeremy Corbyn. So I just thought, as I said, oh, well, we just need to let them know that, they obviously hadn't thought about it. So I actually arranged with a friend. We decided that we would do a talk about it in the Momentum group. I thought that would be fine. I was so naive, Alex, and I was like, okay, we can just ask Lewisham, where I was living, Lewisham Momentum, to host this event, and we could have, you know, two people from Stonewall and two people on the other side, gender critical side, and we could have a little talk. And my feeling was like, oh, if we just got off social media where it's really inflammatory, like we all got in a room, I'm sure we could work out the Gender Recognition Act, because that was what it was all about then. It's about updating the Gender Recognition Act. And it was so funny because, first of all, Momentum just absolutely refused to host it. And I was so shocked because I was so I believed in it at the time. And I was like, what do you mean you're not going to host an event about current legislation that affects the very people that you're supposed to represent, And then we were like, oh, well, because I'd I'd arranged to host it in the public library, the community library where I had been a volunteer, and I knew the management very well. So I was like, okay, we won't do it with Momentum. And I was like, would you even advertise it to your members? And they were like, no. And I was like, okay. So that was really me beginning to see the far left for what it is actually. And then we just carried on, and we just had it in the library. We were planning it in the library. We had two people from Stonewall. We had a lesbian feminist, Julia Long, and a gender critical transsexual, Miranda Yardley, to speak. And it was all set up until a few days, like 5 days before, one of the trans person from Stonewall, Beck Stinton, just suddenly said, oh, so sorry, I've been asked on a last minute hiking holiday and I can't come. And then the lady, the real lady from Stonewall, also said, well, I can't speak about it if the trans can't speak about it. So they cancelled. So we had an emergency meeting with Julia and Miranda, and they were like, well, you don't have to have the counterpoint always. They don't want to debate. Let's just have the talk anyway. You don't have to have a Labour activist at the Conservative Party conference give the other side of the view. So let's just do it anyway. So, okay, we'll just do it anyway. And then the library just got so inundated. It was my first experience of cancel culture, and just all institutions in Southeast London. The library was over the road from Goldsmiths University. They piped up. They had nothing to do with this library ever. They're literally over the road. The library was was supposed to close by the council. Then two women, just brilliant women, local activists, saved the library. They're still there years later working for free on this library. So suddenly this really rich university over the road suddenly saying, well, if you don't cancel it, we're going to not work with you. We're like, well, you don't do any work with the library. You've had nothing to do with the library campaign to save it. But anyway, it was them, like LGBT Lewisham, Stonewall sort of started lying and saying that they'd never agreed to the debate. Anyway, so it got cancelled at the last minute. They had like an emergency board meeting at the library. And even apparently a Labour MP who I never knew who it was phoned up and said, don't do it. And they said they made a statement the day, like the night before, like 9 p.m. saying, we don't have the risk appetite for it. I'd never heard that phrase at that time. Wow. So I also could see their point of view, because these activists, there's a lot in Lewisham and at Goldsmiths University, and they would have threatened to break the windows and scare the users of the library, who are actually vulnerable people a lot of the time, little children and pensioners and stuff. So I did understand the risk appetite thing. And in the end, it didn't really matter, because because at this point I'd been connected to like secret groups of feminists on Facebook, and they'd found a new venue at the University Women's Club in Mayfair. So we relocated. We said, we've got a new venue. We can't tell you where it is because the same thing might happen. So I actually just we were like, we need a meeting point. So we just looked on the like Google Maps, and it's like, oh, Speaker's Corner is really close to the University Women's Club. Let's meet there. That's symbolic and iconic. And so we were met there. This is when I really peaked trans, Alex. We were met there by about 40 or 30 or 40 like trans activists. They were from like the anarchist side of, the Antifa lot. And they had, they were there. They were so horrible, these young people. There were some of them were guys like saying they were trans. There were a lot of girls as well, like actual girls. And they were just so horrible. And they had big signs at Speaker's Corner saying no debate. And I just thought, oh my God, that's really it in a nutshell. And then at that event, this woman who was 60, Maria McLaughlin, was punched to the ground by one of these guys. And so then, and it was just an incredible night. They followed us after that happened. They followed us to the University Women's Club, and they were shouting outside, and we had to stop it early. And I was just like, and then it was all being reported all around the world, like this assault by a 23-year-old guy in lipstick to this old lady. Well, 60 is not that old, but it was framed that way, and it wasn't very nice for a 60-year-old woman to be literally punched to the ground, camera smashed by a young man. And so that's really where I just got thrown in the deep end, because at that point I was still using pronouns. I was still like, oh, let's work this out in real life. We must be able to find a solution, a compromise. I really believed that then, but I don't now.
You don't believe there's a compromise? Because my next question was gonna be, so where are you now with, if we put the law to one side for one moment,
Mm.
and we just look at people who identify as trans, let's leave
Yeah.
the boy and girl, as trans people, what's your kind of what's your approach to them? What's your, are you a person with any compassion and empathy to the situation, or are you hardline and this is what it is, therefore this is what it is?
I think I both have empathy and compassion, and am hardline. Like, I think that position is possible. Like, I feel sorry for anyone with any kind of like identity or mental health or personality issue. And I especially feel empathy for the young people and the vulnerable adults as well, who feel that gender is real and that it's a real thing to to change gender, and especially the harm that comes with that, with medicalization. So I think that most people who are caught up with this are actually very vulnerable, whether they're under 18 or not. So of course I feel really badly for these people, because they think that there's a problem because they behave or feel a certain way about themselves, and that masculinity and femininity are these very difficult things for them. They think that there's something wrong with themselves and their own bodies, and that they have to change something about themselves, when the actual problem is that masculinity and femininity are very strange concepts, and gender is a very kind of unhelpful, it basically just means sex stereotypes, and I don't think they're very helpful. And I don't think they were ever helpful in any context, but I think especially now that it's well, encouraging vulnerable people and children to harm their bodies. I just think healthy bodies. I just think, like, the problem is society or your childhood or something. It's not your sex body.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Venice, I don't know any young trans people.
Mm,
I do know some older trans people
mm,
who, um, when I listen to their stories, and I've been really moved by
mm,
the trauma and the experience of going through what they've been through. That has made me probably given me a lot of compassion, empathy towards them,
mm.
because they're not activists. They're not ones who want to stand on street corners with placards and
No.
vociferously fight their cause. They in the people that I know, they really want just a quiet life and to get on with things.
But do they want to get on with things and that quiet life in women only spaces, Alex? That's the point. Do they want, like, is it like, is there any other group of like oppressed people? Okay, it's okay, we can say, are women oppressed? Like I would say in general, over in the whole picture of the world, yes. um is there any other group that it would be okay for the dominant group to impersonate? Like, is it okay for white people to pretend to be black or Asian? Is it okay for able-bodied people to pretend to be disabled? No. Why is it okay for men to pretend to be women? Why should I, a woman who has to deal with, like, okay, I'd say as a middle class woman, in Britain, I don't have to deal with nearly as much discrimination or oppression as many women around the world or in the past. But still, like, I still have to look after the children, whereas their father doesn't have to as much. Like, I still may be treated a certain way. I'm more likely to be like raped or sexually assaulted than a man. Why should I have to look one of these guys in the face and call him Brenda? Like, what? I don't care how quiet, or you don't stand on street corners with placards. If you're in my toilet, if you're in my changing room, if you're on the all women shortlist, if you're like, you're taking anything from women, why should I respect you? I can feel compassionate about you, like I feel compassionate about some guy who thinks he's Jesus, right? But it's not even offensive to think you're Jesus. It is offensive to think that you, as a man, have any right to any of it. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, and I'll probably get criticized for this on social media, but it's a difficult one for me,
Mm.
and I do
It's
know
difficult when you've got mates doing it. I know.
and it's difficult when I hold quite a liberal position. I run an inclusive church,
I know.
and it's difficult for me because there are Christians within my community in the Church of England who are very conservative in their, and uh, would heavily disagree with the ideology of a trans person. So and this is why I want to have these conversations. I'm
Mm.
kind of working it through, but within that, with these older people that I know, I do have a lot of empathy because I know their struggle, and
Mm.
I know that they're not um, fighting in the same way. Perhaps they might believe it or think it, but they're not fighting for it in the same way. So it does,
If they're in the women's toilets, they're predatory. And I don't care how nice they are. They shouldn't be in there, Alex. If they're
yeah,
wearing like women's stockings, I'm disturbed by that. I don't want to be around them. Who I feel sorry for, all these young children and girls who think that they're boys. Like, that is the worst thing, because you see, it's so interesting with trans activism that the boys, it's all like the I don't know if I can say it on the podcast,
say
about
it.
the lady penis, and they're all very proud of their male genitalia, whereas the girls, even the ones who don't even think they're boys, that they're just non-binary, are binding their breasts. We have no figures on breast binding. Breast binding isn't even classified as a harmful practice, and of course it should be. We have no idea how many girls are doing this. I do know young trans people, and almost all of them are female, and it's just another social contagion of self-harm that young women are doing, and it's a front to these older guys that who may seem very nice. You see, the thing is, you may be 100% convinced that your mate, Reverend Sarah or whatever his name is no threat to women. Yeah, I can be convinced that you're no threat to women. Neither of you are welcome in my changing room at my gym. Not because I think you personally are rapists. Those single sex spaces exist to keep women safe from the very small percentage of men who are voyeurs or rapists or whatever. Like, as it happens, the statistics very clearly show that these men who call themselves Sarah or Brenda or whatever are much more at risk of men who call themselves Alex or Tom, because it is a sexual fetish, including the old guys that seem very nice. Like, just look at what they're wearing usually. They're always like wearing like clothes that are like from sexualized imagery, high heels and stuff. Like, some of them do dress like the vicar's wife, but they always manage to get, when they get their fake breasts, they're always like size D and above. Have you noticed? Even the one that dress like the vicar's wife, they always have these massive tits because it's a perversion. And they are tricking men like you and institutions like you to in they're tricking you. And it's so interesting. Now you're talking about the church, right? And about the conservatives. That's how, like, if you look at the countries where they started off with this trans self ID, they're all heavily Catholic countries: Ireland, Argentina, and Malta, because they know that the church has already disgraced themselves on gay rights and women's rights. So people are like, oh, I don't want to be anti-progressive on this issue. I'm not going to get caught out this time. And that's why it has come under the cover of Catholicism. And validating these men in your groups is actually really harmful. And also, you're speaking to children, and that's what you should be doing as church leaders. What example are you giving, making a little girl call a grown man Sarah? I think it's irresponsible, to be honest. I'm not having a go at you personally. I'm talking about the structure of the church. So much of this has come through the Anglican Church and the Catholic Church in this country.
Okay. Thank you, Venice.
Okay.
I mean, I think I do want to give you your voice, and you've certainly had it there. I think you put a few words into my mouth,
Sure. Okay.
which I think is a little bit unfair. But what I would ask you around this issue of, I think I'm quite comfortable with agreeing with some of what you've said.
Mm.
Trans people should not be engaging in female sports. I agree with that. I wonder if you would. I wonder if the argument is at the beginning of the journey rather than actually when the person has actually done the transition. And what I mean by that, and what I'd be interested to learn is how we educate our young people around these matters. And whether we need to do a little bit more with young people. I do. I've always held the view. I'm a dad of three kids, and I often ask myself, what if one of my kids came to me and said, "Dad, I'm trying to," or I'm gay, or any of those things. And I know my response is that I would love them, whatever. But if one of them presented to me, if you take the priest out of it, just a dad, and said to me, 14-year-old kid came to me and said, "Dad, I think I'm trans." I often take myself back to when I was a kid. When I was 14, 15, I wasn't trans, but I was a bit radical. I went through a goth phase. I had
Yeah,
bleached blonde hair, all those kind of things. And I do think there's an argument that we should encourage our children to let puberty see run its course, and let them learn by the experiences. We seem to expect decisions from our young people far too soon. Is that some common ground that we could agree on?
definitely. Like, I mean, I don't know how anyone who has any sense could think that a child could consent to harming and stunting their natural growth for the sake of a political ideology and identity crisis. Like, people who think that should not be in positions of power, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think we can definitely agree on that.
Yeah. And as the law has fallen into place, Venice, how do you see this? I mean, the dust definitely hasn't settled on this yet, has it? But how do you see it progressing? In a couple of years from now, where do you see this evolving to?
I mean, transgenderism is just going to be like lobotomies in a few, in 100 years' time. People are going to look back and go, "Oh my god, I can't believe that happened." Like, there won't be any trans people in 100 years' time, because it will just be like a mad thing. I mean, there might, you can wear what you like. You can call yourself Brenda if you like, but having surgery and taking artificial cross-sex hormones is just a medical, like, absolute scandal, and it won't last, because we're going to see what happens to these people, and it isn't nice. We're not making it up. Like, our concern, like my concern is for women's spaces, yeah, but my main concern is to stop this medical scandal. And it won't last because we're not making up. We're going to see what happens to these children, and it's so terrifying how many, there's thousands of British children have taken puberty blockers. It's not even over yet because there's still like this medical trial, but we are fighting, we are winning. Sense, because most political arguments are complicated, Alex. This is not complicated. This is so obvious. This is a medical scandal, and anyone who's still going on with it is just crazy, in my opinion.
So, and people who might be watching or listening to this,
Mm.
will know that you've identified Reverend Sarah, who is trans. She's
I
there.
just heard that from your podcast because I
Yeah.
was listening to your podcast last night.
So there is a balance there. I mean, I'm not the BBC and don't pretend to be, but there are other voices, and that is one of the realities is that I could easily go online now and find a dozen people who would like to disagree with you.
Sure.
And it's where we find some land where everything can kind of settle and people move on from here.
I
And
just like to say I don't know who Reverend Sarah is or anything about him. I just heard you talking about him on while I was researching your podcast. That's all. So I just used him as an example. I have no idea what he dresses like or whatever. But the fact that a man in the church is being allowed to call, you have someone who's preaching to people, including children, a man calling himself Sarah. For me, I think that's so bad. I
right,
don't think these people should be. These men have got a serious problem. They've got a debilitating problem, and it's not something to celebrate. It's something that they need help with. Helping them is not enabling their delusion.
so,
I feel
so
sorry for them.
okay, okay. Well, I just want to I think I don't want to personalize it actually because
Sure,
I think it's probably best not to,
that's fine. As I say, I didn't know anything about this
but
guy.
I mean, the church has got. I know the church has had a kicking around its safeguarding policies, but it has got a robust procedure, and people are
Not, atheists don't see that, Alex. I'm sorry. We don't think that this church, any church I've ever seen, has any robust safeguarding procedures.
So what should happen? What do you think should happen to as an atheist? What should happen to these people? Do you think they should,
They need help. They need help. Not they don't need help enabling their delusion that they're women or men or boys or girls. They need help understanding that their body is you know is a gift. Whether you believe in God or Mother Nature, that healthy body, there's nothing more that human beings should be grateful for than health. Why would you? Why could any sane person encourage somebody to take harmful opposite sex hormones or puberty blockers, castration agents? The irony of, like, say, for example, like everyone celebrates Alan Turing. They are giving the same drugs, the same castration agents to kids as they gave to him as a punishment for being gay. It's so like ironic and like symbolic and weird.
Yeah, but so you'd also criticize the NHS
Yeah.
protocols then.
All our institutions have been captured. We need to take back control of the churches, of the political parties, of the museums, of the universities, of our schools, because they've all gone mad. And this is just like, if you can believe that a woman has a penis, you will believe anything. You you could you could believe any crazy thing. That's why it's so dangerous as well. That's why it's not just about women's rights and children mutilating children's bodies. It's the whole thing. This is why they're like, I don't want to go too conspiratorial about it, but that's why, like, the EU and the UN and the World Health Organization, that's why they love it, because it's all part of their insane agenda.
Yeah, it's the agenda is, I recently had Julie Bindel on,
Yeah, I watched it.
who was deeply critical of Stonewall. Do you share that criticism?
100%.
Yeah.
A joke. But it's not just like they're obviously a joke, like Mermaid, Stonewall, that they should shut down. But it's like all the other institutions that should be doing other things, like our trade unions, like have been completely captured. Unison at the moment. I've just in the papers today, like there's some bloke in a women's role. It's like they only have these women's roles so they can put blokes in them. It's crazy.
I've got another question, and this is a genuine question. I'd like to know what you
Oh,
think. Is it possible for me to be a feminist?
I don't know about that, Alex. I don't really like care about it because I don't call myself a feminist because what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. It can mean that it can mean that you know. For one example, let's talk about prostitution as a feminist issue. You know, you've got feminist people who call themselves feminists who like sex workers work, and people who call themselves feminists who think it's paid rape. So how can feminism cannot mean anything anymore? And see, and also I would have called myself feminist when I was younger before I really thought about politics. But for me, it's just like really part of identity politics. Like, if only women can be feminists, right? Then how is that not identity politics? Like, surely there are various analysis made by feminists, and you can kind of like support those views or not. Like, I can't see how you can be a feminist. So, but maybe that had a place in like the 20s or the 80s or whatever. But I think in the 2020s, it just doesn't mean anything anymore. So you can support women's rights. I can support women's rights. We can campaign on those issues. And what's the difference? Like, we can all campaign on issues that don't immediately affect us, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're. I mean, in the church, I think it's still relevant in the 2020s. I don't know if you've heard of a group called Watch for Women. So there are, we've seen in Rome, haven't we, with male bishops or male priests. Church of England is a little bit more liberal, but it's still a struggle to, we've got a vacancy coming up for the Archbishop of Canterbury.
he
And
was very he was in a difficult position, to be honest, Justin, because he was just trying to keep it all together, like the two sides, the progressives and the conservatives. So but you see, where did that lead him? It led him to covering up sexual abuse or bully or whatever it was, physical abuse, I don't know. But like, you can't, you have to be brave as a leader, right? And you need a direction. And if you haven't, if you can't choose it, you can't keep everyone happy. You're not going to, no one can keep balancing these two sides of the church. And it's not even just two sides. Like, so you might have somebody who's conservative on gender, but is progressive on something else, gay marriage or something. I don't know.
yeah, and even as somebody who's not part of the church, do you think a female archbishop would be a positive move? Or do you
I
care?
have no opinion or interest. Sorry. Like,
Okay.
I don't mind. Like, I think some of those female bishops are really dangerous in the House of Lords, to be honest. Probably shouldn't say that, but like, they are the ones with the maddest ideas over trans, for example, and who would fully support you know Frankenstein doctor like Helen Webley you had on before. There's female bishops and male bishops who would so totally support what that woman does. So like, for me, it it doesn't matter if you have like what you're if you're a man or a woman, you just have the best person for the job, right? I think by choosing people, like, because, like, that's why, like, so many, like, if you look at female MPs, right? If you look at female Labour MPs, generally they're not nearly as strong or brave or interesting or well spoken as conservative female MPs, right? That's because the conservative women get there by merit, whereas the women in the Labour Party are deliberately selected, and they're selected to be puppets by the men in the trade unions. So it's just identity politics. It's completely meaningless. You should always choose the best person for the job, regardless of their protected characteristics.
I could talk to you for ages because you're very leading in your comments and stuff, and I really enjoyed that. But
I'm enjoying it.
I think we should end in a minute. Yeah, that was interesting what you just said there about the politicians. I personally feel that's men and women in the Labour Party that are just following a line that irritates them. the heck out of me. But yeah, so you've no desire to go back into politics then, just to finish off.
Well,
And
no, I work in the, I volunteer for Claire
yeah,
Fox and the Lord, so I'm very much more into politics than I ever have been. Like, she runs the Academy of Ideas, which has the Battle of Ideas every October in central London, and it's just brilliant. There's 100 sessions for all different debates about all the hot button topic issues of the day. 100 different debates, 400 different speakers, over 1,000 people listening each day. It's absolutely brilliant. So I think that's where we're at now. Like, I think we need to have public conversation and move things forward that way. And we should listen
maybe
to
it's
everyone.
there's volunteering, isn't there? And there's volunteering, and there's actually getting proper stuck in. I think you was on Alex Phillips' show on talk, and I like Alex, and I said she needs to go into politics. I'm not saying that as a supporter, but these are the big, hard conversations that you're talking about.
Mm.
I'm sure people would criticize me for having you on,
Yeah, I'm sure
but
they will.
I don't care about that
I know.
because I think it's the conversation is the important thing.
Yeah,
The freedom of speech to have that conversation is essential, and whether it's you or whether it's Helen Webley who has been on or whoever
yeah,
it is, I think people need to hear these conversations.
yeah.
Just want to hear still waters and yes sir, no sir, three bags full sir. So I applaud
100%.
I do applaud you for that very much.
And you say I'm just a volunteer, but like I like working for strong women and who are doing stuff. Like, I'm not that spokesperson. I'm the person behind, one of many, and I love to support Claire Fox in what she's doing, and she's opening these conversations. Just the other day, I went with one of her kind of like other organizations debating matters. We went into a prison and we did debating matters beyond bars in a male prison. And, the benefits of that, for example, are just tenfold. Like, it's so good for so many reasons. And I just think that is genuinely doing stuff. That is politics. It's like actually making change. And I think, Christian people do that, like, and atheists can do that, like public service, and it goes beyond getting a salary or being elected or whatever. It's like just using your life to make the world better as however you can.
Yeah, well, that's a good place to end, I think. Venice, thanks ever so much for coming on. Good,
Thank you, Alex.
best wishes for all what you do next, and
Yeah, and stay in touch.
yeah, all right. Thanks for coming on, and
Bye. Thanks, Alex.
God bless you. See you. Bye.
See ya. I hope that was okay.